Welcome back to the swamp, my friends, and welcome if you're new. Today I'm going to be diving into some creepy and downright strange cryptid encounter horror stories sent in by viewers just like you. As always, if you have a story that you would like to share in a future episode, be sure to submit them at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp, and stories like yours will help keep this show going on a daily basis. Now, be sure to slap that like button, subscribe if you're new, and get ready for these creepy and downright strange cryptid encounters that'll keep you up tonight. The Ghost Foot Monster by Murphy. The events I describe are accurate. I will carry them with me for the rest of my life. These incidents occurred around midsummer in 2013 or 2014 in a small town in rural New Hampshire. My friend was present for both occurrences and witnessed the same things I did. The first event took place on a warm summer night. My friend and I lived in the same town, about 2 miles away. At the time, I had my license, and he did not. So I would drive to his house to hang out and play video games, or pick him up and drive back to my place to hang out. Right down the hill from my place is this old textile mill that has been closed down for a while. Pretty much as long as I've ever seen it, it's been run down. And there have always been rumors going around about how people died working in the mills years back. And sometimes at night, if you look into the windows, you can see ghostly figures still dressed in the old-time clothing. Across the street from the mill is a dirt parking lot where telephone companies park their work trucks and grab them in the morning. I had just picked up my friend and drove back to my house. As we were driving by that dirt parking lot, we happened to notice something. The telephone company trucks were big, and you could see underneath them, on the other side of one of the trucks, I saw a pair of legs and feet, as if someone were standing there motionless. The legs were very pale and stood out in the darkness. There were no shoes, just bare feet. It looked like the legs of a child around 8 years old. As we kept driving and passed the truck, the feet and legs disappeared like they were never there. We were going fast enough that they could not have run off before we passed them if that was an actual person. I asked my friend if he had just seen that, thinking I might have been crazy. "You mean the white legs and the feet?" he asked. To this day, I still hope it was our imagination playing tricks on us. But sometimes I wonder if a child may have died working in the mill many years ago, when child labor was legal. This last event happened to me and my friend. It was late at night, and I was driving home after the movies. Let me remind you that I live in a very rural, woodsy town. We were on this stretch of road close to this place where we did see the ghost legs originally, with woods on either side, and we were not driving very fast as the speed limit for that road is only 20 miles per hour because it is very windy. Just remembering this next part sends chills down my spine as I write this. This thing flies over the road, just above the tree line as we drive. It flew next to a street light, lighting the creature well. At first, I thought it was some type of bird, but as more of it appeared by the light of the street, I realized this thing was much too large to be any bird of any type. The creature we saw had the body roughly the shape of the size of a large wolf, but with short fur. It had bat-like wings big enough to support its weight and size. Unlike a bird, the creature had front and back legs and a tail. Luckily, I didn't see it long enough to get a good description of its head or face, and I'm glad I didn't, because I was already completely paralyzed with fear. Later, my friend claimed it had red eyes. My friend and I did not say a single word the whole time this happened. The rest of the way to the house, we said nothing. When we finally pulled into his driveway, I shut off the car, and we both just silently started freaking out. I was hoping I was going crazy, and to this day, I would think I was, but someone saw the exact creature I did. We went inside and told his brother, who thought we were absolutely crazy. After that, we said nothing to anyone for a long time because who would believe us? To this day, I don't know what kind of creature we saw that night. Just thinking about it, going to the woods in that town now scares me. If anyone has any idea what it might have been, or has any strange creature stories around New England, I would love to hear about it in the comments. Shadow Creature in My Home by AshesFallin. I am a 20-year-old girl, and I've been in tune with the paranormal my entire life. Admittedly, I have become slightly obsessed, not in the summoning demons way, but more with too much research and spending my free time and all day at work, if I'm honest, listening to podcasts like this one. I have many stories to tell, but I decided to start with one that has been weighing on me for quite some time. I moved into a new place in December of 2017 with my new roommate, who we will call Nikki. When we moved in, I felt a massive weight off my shoulders because for the first time, I didn't feel any pressure in my home. Skip forward to May, and things had been going pretty well when we found out a family friend who was 16, we'll call her Morgan, didn't have a place to live, so we invited her to stay with us. I had known this kid for roughly 15 years and knew she came from a messed up family. She told us her dad was a Satanist and had cast some sort of curse on her, and now she was being followed by what she described as a shadow creature. With my past of the paranormal, I believed her but didn't really think anything of it and didn't want to take it too seriously because obviously we had some real emotional issues going on here. A few weeks passed and little inconveniences occurred, such as our coffee table being moved or mail being scattered across the floor. We have cats, so I didn't really think that much of it, but I was pretty annoyed about it. This kept happening, then gradually started getting weirder, like our laundry detergent being poured out under the dining room table, and the empty bottle was set up in the middle of the puddle. At around the same time, both Morgan and Nikki started having issues with sleep paralysis. Nikki used to get it all the time as a kid, but hadn't in years. The strange thing was that despite having separate experiences, both girls claimed to see the same thing. A child-sized black figure. The body was small, the head was too big, the hands were too long. It was always the same description. They couldn't see any other features, just a black outline. Luckily, I didn't have sleep paralysis, and I never have in my life, so I mistakenly thought I was safe. One night, I was home alone, and I was in a deep, depressing mood. Everything in the house just felt so heavy that I took a nap on the couch. When I woke up, I couldn't breathe. I felt like someone was pushing on my chest, so I sat up, and the pressure was gone. Then I noticed the room was dark, like unnaturally dark. My TV and the hall light were on, so there was no reason for my little portion of the living room to feel so enveloped in black. I decided to not really think about it, turned the TV up, and started scrolling through my phone. I heard heavy footfall from the kitchen directly behind me a moment later. It sounded like a full-grown man. I thought someone had come into the house while I was asleep, because we always left the sliding glass door in the kitchen unlocked. I know it wasn't the best thing to do, but I've changed since then. Too afraid to turn around and look, I took out my phone and went to Snapchat. I turned on my flash on my screen, and everything went completely black when I switched to the front-facing camera. My flash wouldn't work anymore, so I drew the courage to turn around. I saw nothing, and instantly the room was light again. I grabbed my keys and left until my roommate was off work. A couple of days had passed, and my roommate and I burned sage, oiled all the entrances, and told whatever was in the house that it was not welcome and had to leave. I don't really know where I truly fall on things like this, but I was willing to try anything. I was hoping that would be the end of it, and we didn't have any more things moved. Morgan had moved in with her brother, and the house seemed a bit lighter, except Nikki was still experiencing some pretty extreme sleep paralysis almost every single night. Skip forward a few weeks and I'm laying in bed with my 2 cats. It's somewhere around 3 a.m. and I heard pots and pans moving in the kitchen. My cats woke up and started growling and hissing, which is out of character for them, so I grabbed my gun and checked every inch and corner of the house. Nikki was still sleeping, so I returned to my room thinking it could have been maybe her cat, who likes to hide in the cupboards from time to time. 3 loud bangs made me jump so high the second I shut the door that I fell back onto my bed. I yelled for the thing to go away. I didn't want it to hear, and it had to leave. What felt like minutes later, I opened the door and my older cat ran out, turned into the kitchen, and screamed like she was hurt. I looked at her for like an hour, and I couldn't find anything wrong with her. I went to bed crying, because she was acting weird after that. The following day, I woke up, and everybody was asleep beside me normally. Nobody seemed harmed. It just seemed like everybody was a bit freaked out. I woke up my roommate and told her about the night before. She explained that she had been awake when I got up and heard the 3 loud bangs herself, but was way too afraid to get out of bed. We oiled again and brought in her mother, who worked at the church, and she blessed the house. Not too long after Morgan's little brother moved in with me, everything kind of seemed to cease. It makes me wonder if Morgan's dad did curse her. He always told his 3 daughters they were mistakes and that he only intended to have 2 sons. That might explain everything. After she moved in with her older brother, it didn't really bother her anymore, and when her younger brother came to stay with me, the problem seemed to just move away entirely. All I know is whatever it was really negative. My depression had never been worse, and we were constantly arguing in the house. I'm just glad it's over.
Something in the Bighorn Mountains by Cam. I was younger when this story occurred. Of course, all the adults say kids have a wild imagination, even though my buddy and I swore up and down that this had happened. Anywho, let's get to the story. It was toward the end of the week, and my mom and her boyfriend at the time, I wanted to go up the mountain to his family's cabin. I live north of Wyoming, where the Bighorn Mountains reside. As a 12-year-old, I asked my mom if I could bring my buddy. For his safety, his name will be Nick. I called Nick and asked if he wanted to go to the cabin for the weekend. He had to ask his mom, and with our moms being close since they were younger, she said yes. Once we got everything in my mom's boyfriend's pickup, we went ahead and picked him up. As he hopped into the back of the truck, we talked about the general things that typically we would talk about, school, girls, etc. As we got to the cabin on the first day, nothing really major happened. We went 4-wheeling and had hot dogs and s'mores, and the first night came and went without incident. The start of the next day is when things began to get a little spooky. The day went normal as much as it could. Towards the afternoon, we stayed around the cabin. My mom kicked us out of the place after lunch. We hiked around the house and we discussed a few different things such as movies, shows, Call of Duty, etc., as well as grabbing a stick and pretending to be in Call of Duty, as weird as it may have sounded. Towards dusk, I showed him the treehouse roughly 70 to 80 yards away from the cabin. The treehouse is a triangular platform 10 feet up in the air made of 2x4s and a makeshift ladder. The platform is between 3 trees on each point in a triangle shape, with rails to help with safety and all that. We had our legs dangling from the platform, talking again with the occasional silence between us talking. The forest became dead, which is a natural sign of a predator being around, which became a big red flag with both of us knowing that, especially with us going hunting every fall. We ended up getting the chills. Nick broke the silence. "Hey, do you see that?" As he struggles to get the sentence out. So that's all the light we had. A feeling of fight or flight. With the sun setting and it being all the light we had, that feeling of fight or flight came through our bodies. We began to hear something crashing through the brush, and in the distance, we saw what I can only describe as a giant, hairy humanoid creature peering at us from behind a tree that was roughly 50 feet away from us. It was at least 9 feet tall. Once I realized what it could be, the hair on the back of our necks stood up immediately. Our first mistake was looking at each other as shock kicked in. We looked back at where the creature was, and now it was a bit closer. It was kind of like suspense from those movies in like Jurassic Park when the raptor broke through the glass. We both hopped off, and as I'm looking back and forth between Nick and the creature, he hopped down and ran to the meadow in front of the cabin, closer to where we were. Looking back at the beast, I saw it was about 30 yards away. Fear filled my body, and I shook without looking away from the beast. I scooted my butt over as I was getting ready to run when I happened to look up and saw this thing face to face. I saw it in its full glory, hair covered head to toe, with a brown and blonde mixture of color. With the setting sun putting an orange tint to it, I ended up freaking out as though I had seen death itself. I jumped to the ground, rolling as I hit it, getting up and booking it to the same meadow as my friend. Nick was waiting there already. As I'm running, I hear twigs and sticks breaking behind us. I knew this thing was chasing me. Once I got closer to the meadow, I saw Nick telling me to run. As I got to him, I looked back and saw the creature in the tree line. As we were staring at it, it was staring right back. It did something we will never forget. With us catching our breath, we heard it. It was like a loud roar. We ended up booking it to the front of the cabin, slamming the door shut, and my mom and her boyfriend looked at us puzzled. They were asking us questions and we tried to answer, but as I said, they thought we were crazy. After dinner and having some s'mores, we ended up going to bed. The cabin had an open area upstairs, where the 6 beds were for us kids to hang out in. Towards the back of the upstairs is a screen door. I woke up sometime in the middle of the night to a sound of scratching on wood. The light outside the screen never turns off. I saw a hand scraping the deck floor outside. I freaked out because I swear it was the same hand from that creature. Something is prowling my campsite. By Anonymous.
First off, I want to thank you for telling the first story I submitted a few months back. You did a wonderful job, and I'm very grateful you decided to tell it. This next story takes place in the Cascade Mountains of Washington State. I had just came back from my second Iraq deployment, and had been assigned to the USA Air Ambulance Detachment at Fort Drum, New York. 7 months later, our unit was transferred to Yakima Training Center in Yakima, Washington. The constant deployment and change put a great deal of strain on an already weak marriage, resulting in her moving back to live with her folks in New Hampshire. I was depressed about it, and when a 4-day weekend came up, I decided to head into the mountains for a little time for myself. The road was rough. Going as soon as I left the highway, I kept driving in my 2000 Ford F-150 until I saw another road about 10 miles away from the highway. This road was overgrown and looked like it hadn't been used for some time. Since my intention was to completely escape away from people for a few days, I took it. The road was hardly wide enough for my truck. It went all the way and over a ridge into a quiet field in the middle of the woods. Small steam made its way through the center. I pulled off the road and decided to make a camp. Within a short period of time, a campfire was made and the back of my truck was set up for sleeping. I had an old camper shell and an inflatable mattress with blankets and such. I made a dinner of steak and potatoes and watched the sun disappear below the horizon. It was beautiful out there. No sounds of cars or anything. I felt like I honestly had the whole world to myself, and I felt good for the first time in a long time. A few drinks later of single malt scotch, I decided to go to bed and get some sleep for an early start the next day. I had planned to do some fishing and maybe have a small hike. The weather was cool and the stars and the moon were clear. I fell asleep as soon as my head hit the pillow. A few hours later, though, I was woke up to a growl outside my truck. Heavy footsteps circled around my vehicle, and then I heard a high-pitched scream. I normally, at the sound of being paranoid, carry a handgun while camping, and this time was no different. I reached over and unholstered my Charter Arms Undercover .38 Special and sat with my back to the cab. It was still circling the vehicle, and I managed to glimpse it through the side camper window. A dark and mysterious-looking woman and a short, plump man were staring at my vehicle. They did not look armed, so I decided to go ask them what they wanted. I got out of the truck and looked in the direction I had seen them, but there was nothing. I searched the entire area around the site. Nothing. I got back in the truck and locked the door. It must have been my imagination, I told myself, and a few hours later, I eventually passed out again. I again awoke to the truck rocking and screaming and hollering in the early morning as a person was hitting my camper shell repeatedly and yelling obscenities. I did not want to remain there any longer. I slid through the sliding window in my cab, started the truck, and got the heck out of there. When my headlights came on, I saw a circle of people in robes surrounding me. I threw the truck into reverse and punched it out of there. They jumped out of the way as I barreled into reverse through their circle and took off like a bat out of hell, with them running behind me on foot. Then I got to the main road. I floored it out of there. Unfortunately, a highway patrolman was right there, and I was pulled over. He came to my window, and after I related the story of what happened, he told me that area I was in was home to a religious cult. The road I went up to was supposed to have a no trespassing sign and a chain. I'm happy nothing more sinister happened.
Nicolet National Forest Terror by Luke 8. A little background before we begin. Everyone says the same thing. I'm an avid outdoorsman. I hunt, fish, camp, hike, and kayak. My buddy is not an outdoorsman. He goes party camping with me, and that's about it. We have never experienced anything like what I'm about to tell you. This happened in 2018. The day before, we were camping at a lake in the Nicolet National Forest in northern Wisconsin. The trees were changing color at the time, and the leaves were starting to fall. It was freezing at night, being October. My buddy got cold quickly and drove around in the mornings to warm up. We would go into town to get gas and supplies, mainly beer. There needed to be more to do at our campground, and with no hiking or activities, day drinking is kind of what we relied on, listening to music and talking about party camping. The next day was going to be an overcast, rainy day, so we decided to spend it by driving around, looking at other campgrounds and scouting them out for other trips. We quote-unquote partied that night and went to bed late. Everything was normal. We heard wolves, owls, loons, and all the other good stuff. But after a while, we heard nothing. Just pure quiet. It was peaceful. It started raining early the next day. Just a drizzle at first, but enough to make camping a pain. We got up late, hungover and cold. We dressed in our hiking gear and jumped in the car to get warm. We left the lake campsite a little after noon to check out the other campgrounds. It was about 5 miles to the next one and basically on the highway without privacy. We would generally check them out, but it started raining very hard. We stayed in the car, marking down the campsites we liked and the ones we didn't. This one we didn't really particularly like. Now the thing about this national forest is there are campsites and campgrounds spread out absolutely everywhere. They need to be connected in some sort of way. So you have to get on the highway, find a little sign that says campsites this way, and then drive down a dirt road for 10 to 15 minutes to find them. We made it to about 8 before 5 o'clock. We were at the entrance of what was going to be our last one for the day. It said the road was 15 miles. I went slowly, not trying to kick too many rocks up into my car. The road was honestly pretty eerie. The trees made the street look like we were going down a cave. A couple of minutes in and the rain had stopped. At the campsites, there was no one there. It was beginning to get dark. We had been in the car all day and we were ready to get out and stretch our legs. We parked at the first campsite and got out. The birds were singing their lullabies and everything was still. There were 5 campsites in a circular clearing with thick trees all around. The sites were open to each other and could have been better for my camping. Only if you rented all the sites. Honestly, we walked around the circle and noticed a sign that said group camp pointing up a trail. We started down the gravel path full of wet leaves to the site. After walking for some time, I realized it wasn't even close. I raised this concern with my buddy, but we wanted to see the site anyway.
It was almost dark out, but we could still see rather well. I noticed the birds had stopped singing at this point. It was a hushed tone in the forest. All we heard was our own footsteps. We made it to the group side after walking for quite a few minutes. It was still and nothing was moving. We were at the end of the trail looking into the area. The hair on the back of my neck started to stand up, and my skin crawled. Standing, about 30 feet to our left, was a very massive, dark-haired creature. I was frozen with fear. My buddy hadn't noticed it yet and was still walking. I said his name quietly. He must have known something was wrong because he stopped and turned to his left immediately. We were both frozen. I was standing there what felt like minutes, but it couldn't have been more than a few seconds. I knew what it was, but in my head I was saying they weren't real. I couldn't even speak. Then it started slowly moving towards us. It started yelling some deep throaty gibberish at us. Against all my instincts to hold my ground and fight back, we ran for it. It ran with us, and it was still screaming. We kept running for our lives. It was running parallel to us. Its scream was replaced by what I can only describe as a deep, throaty huffing noise. It was crashing through the dead brush, keeping up with us effortlessly. We were running, trying not to slip on the leaves or just die. We saw the car and had hope. As soon as we got to the clearing, it stopped. It hit a tree, more like it punched through a tree. We heard a huge crack and crash. We were almost to the car when this massive tree hit the ground next to us. We then listened to what can only be described as a great ape beating its chest in triumph while screaming. We jumped in the car and sped away. The rest was a blur. We got back to the campground, packed up and left at night. We never spoke about it again and haven't talked about it since. I'm almost entirely possible what we experienced that day was a Bigfoot. Thanks for listening to these creepy and downright strange cryptid encounter horror stories that'll freak you out tonight. If you enjoyed these stories, please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you're new and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new episode. I upload them multiple times a week on all things natural and supernatural. If you have a story that you might be interested in sharing in the future, please be sure to submit them at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. It's stories like yours that truly help keep this show going on a daily basis. If you're on the go but don't have YouTube Premium, but still want to download and listen to your favorite Swamp Dweller scary stories no matter where you are, you can download them absolutely free from Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and pretty much everywhere else you find your favorite podcast online. I'd love to know in the comments down below, what story was your favorite tonight? I love seeing your reviews. They help me pick out better stories in the future, and it really helps these videos grow in the algorithm when we have more of that going on. Thank you guys so much for all the support. I'll see you guys incredibly soon with another creepy video.